Today's episode is brought to you by Freedom Project Academy. Looking for a K-12 classical online school built on Judeo-Christian values? FPA is enrolling now for the fall. Request your free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.
It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello everyone and welcome. I am Dr. Duke and I am joined today by Mr. David Fiorazo. It's an all-Italian cast. Break out the vino before we get started. Please hit that share button. We're not going to share the wine though, so we can educate more patriots around the country. Okay, we start in two stories really. In California. California, here we come. We have one where a judge strikes down a Los Angeles school district's vaccine mandate. So again, you have a school district trying to put masks in. Moms and dads, pay close attention. They're going to try. A judge strikes that down, and California, the entire state, backs off previously strict school COVID guidelines and will not require masks in school. So right when Los Angeles has been told to step down about vaccines, the whole state now seems to have abandoned, in the short term anyway, masks, Dave.
So this is an across the country decision per state and per district, correct?
Right.
So it's not the federal government's decision. This is up to. So California, I'm kind of surprised that a judge would strike it down in California, and I'm sure other school districts are going to go through something similar. But my concern was, Duke, that they were still thinking. We're at a place. How long have we been past COVID? We're at a place where we're still thinking about masking young children for 7 hours a day. Where's the research on the effects on their lungs or on their anxiety and other things? Why don't we ever talk about these issues?
Well, and no one wants to talk about this, and people are getting banned left and right from social media for talking about it. But even as troubling as the masks, perhaps worse, are these vaccines. No one's talking a lot about the real serious side effects that people are experiencing out there, particularly younger people out there. That's a whole other issue. The story itself, the Los Angeles Unified School District COVID vaccine mandate was struck down by a Superior Court judge who ruled that the nation's second largest public school system exceeded its authority, California, who would have thought it, right, by imposing requirements beyond those of the whole state. So Los Angeles wanted to go farther than the state. The decision did not have an immediate effect, however, as the proposed mandate had been already postponed until July of 2023, but the district's school board was resolute in defending the policy. On the other hand, a group called Let Them Breathe, this is what you were saying, Dave, all of the problems with the masks. Let Them Breathe, a California-based organization opposed to vaccine and mask mandates in schools, celebrated the ruling by Judge Mitchell et al. Beckloff. And here's a quote. Judge Beckloff's ruling confirms that individual school districts do not have the authority to impose local vaccination requirements in excess of state requirements. And Ari L. Spangler, a legal representative of the plaintiff, said, quote, "We are very pleased with this ruling as it ensures that no child will be forced out of the classroom because of COVID-19. And that is a wonderful thing. A little jurisprudence being handed down to the excessive lunatics in California."
Oh, how long do you think we're going to continue to fight this battle? Whether it be in the courts or in the schools or the different districts, different states, blue state, red state, different policies. This is just insane.
Well, on the one hand, different states is good, right? As we see with
federalism,
right? You let the states decide. And places like California are already bumping the ceiling of what they can get away with. More tepid states, more conservative states, I should say, you wouldn't have this kind of nonsense. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say about this is I'll make you bet. I'll bet you a week's pay that the last 2 weeks of August, we're in the middle of July, a month from now, when school is about to kick off, you watch how seriously the conversation will turn to masks and vaccines. There will be schools, districts, there will be states that will put, and the NEA, we saw in an earlier story yesterday, the NEA is calling for mandatory vaccines and for masking. This is not over. Mom and Dad, if you're thinking about putting your kids in public schools, but you're scared, you're afraid of the masks, and you don't want any vaccines, don't wait until the end of August, because if you wait that long to pull your kid out, it's going to be very difficult to find a school for you, and this is what they're counting on. They did this to you last year, David.
That's very interesting you say that, because parents are saying, okay, now they're starting to understand, they're not going to be as strict with the policies, the COVID policies, the masks and everything. And then at the end of the year, right before the school year starts, they're going to say, okay, just to keep your kids safe, we're going to implement this mask policy. And, you know, a very telling line in this article simply says, COVID-19 is here to stay. If it's here to stay, they're thinking along these lines then, right? It's here to stay. That's their belief. Now, whether they're backing it 100% or not, I don't know, but they say it right in this article. I think that's why a lot of them are pushing this. It's really anyways, it's outside the schools too. This is happening in our culture. But just in the schools, we're concerned because it's young children we're talking about.
There have been so many more dangerous diseases for kids that are here to stay that we never hear about, right? There are far more kids suffering, far more serious symptoms and problems for much bigger problems than COVID, and we don't mask for that, and we've never forced kids back kids into corners on what they can and cannot do with their own bodies. All of a sudden, COVID. I think we will know, looking back at this historically, there's going to be a before COVID BC and after COVID AC about how every little healthcare is going to be an excuse for the federal and state governments to take more and more civic rights away from moms and dads in particular.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your App Store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
All right, friends, the next story we're talking about is really along the same lines as the pandemic. They're talking about this since COVID-19 is here to stay. Due to the pandemic, tweet scorches Biden for blaming academic crisis on COVID. Oh my goodness, I'm sure we have a lot to say about this. Duke, I can't wait to get to your thoughts, but who's to blame for the dreadful education system and academic failures? Well, the way I see it, you can probably add a few more to this, Democrats have at least 4 choices: COVID, Trump, Russia, or not enough money, not enough funding to the education system. That's what they're blaming. So Biden's solution, of course, is more funding to the NEA, because he needs his back scratched by the teachers' unions in the upcoming midterms, right? This is what he needs to happen. Oh, and after-school programs, that's another solution. Keep the kids longer. Something doesn't add up here, Duke.
Isn't it amazing how every problem in education is never the responsibility of the schools? I mean, they're the first level of contact. They are the so-called professional educators whose job it is to get your kids to where they need to be. You would think that a teacher, even a moderately competent teacher, would be able to adapt her classroom to an online format. I've done it. It's not that hard to do. As a professor, I do it at my university all the time. It's not that complicated. It's just amazing how everything is insulated for the public schools. They can, no matter what tragedy befalls our educational system, no matter how absolutely illiterate and mathematically clueless our kids are, it's never the fault of the teachers, and it's never the fault of the teachers union, who keep getting more money and more raises every year. Take a look at this actual tweet from POTUS, right? We should make that S-POTUS, senile POTUS. Due to the pandemic, kids are behind in math and reading. Got news for you, Joe. You may have been asleep all this time, but way before COVID, the kids were way behind in math and reading.
Yes.
We know, he says, how to bridge this gap. I'm calling on schools to use the American Rescue Plan funds, more money to expand tutoring and summer learning and after-school programs to provide 250,000 more tutors and mentors for our kids. So it's not enough. So that is a tacit admission that our public school teachers cannot get the job done.
No.
You're going to have to hire outside tutors. You're going to have to you're going to hire mentors now. Just get rid of the public schools. Hire 2 million tutors. The kids will get a better education, wouldn't they?
Oh gosh, it's so messed up. And of course, we're here to help. We have the solutions. You know, didn't Reagan say something about some of the most fearful words? The government says, "Hi, I'm from the government. We're here to help." Remember, this happened in 2020. The Biden administration worked with teachers' unions to influence the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to craft policies related to reopening schools and masking guidance. So what happened? They bullied the CDC really into compliance, right? So are they following the science, or are they following their political ideology?
They bullied and they bribed. Don't forget that one, the CDC and the WHO for that matter. And so some of the moms and dads are still mocking. Joe is terribly mockable, as you know. Take a look at another response to that tweet from Liz Wolfe. Quote, "I can fix this for you. Due to school closures, teachers' unions, unreasonable demands that were wrongly acquiesced to, and bad CDC mask policies, kids are behind in math and reading. Now we want to throw money at the problem without acknowledging the role we played in getting there." Thank you, Ms. Wolfe. That's what I was trying to say inelegantly 2 minutes ago. You said it in tweet format, 140 characters. Maybe we should have her on the show, although the show would be over in about 5 minutes. Nevertheless, she's exactly right. We've been talking about this. There's no way around it. This pandemic stuff, it has become a huge boondoggle. And that's why I think I said this before. Get ready for before COVID and after COVID, right? BC, old common sense with regards to infection, common sense, actual science, non-overreacting, recognizing how the younger kids aren't affected by COVID, nothing at all like older people are. That's before COVID. Now what you're going to see is mass hysteria over and over and over again. I think the only reason we haven't heard more about monkeypox, although Joe Biden is beginning to talk a little bit about it, and the CDC is as well, one of the reasons that will never rise to the level of COVID, because A, it's sexually transmitted, and we know you ought to be able to have sex with whom you want, when you want, animals included, and number two, it's much easier to spread through homosexual sex than other forms of sex. So trust me, monkeypox is not going to get anything. My point is, diseases now are important or not important based on their political correctness.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
Okay, this next story is interesting, and it's about autism rates. Now, here's the headline. Autism rates in children and teens skyrocket, up 52% in just 3 years. So the number of children and adolescents with a diagnosis somewhere along the autism spectrum, which really can be kind of broad at times, it continues to rise. It's according to the latest out of, can you say that word, Guangdong Pharmaceutical University? What? Guangdong. Pharmaceutical University in China. As of 2020, 1 out of every 30 kids is now considered autistic. It's a 52% jump from 2017. Now, the data is from the CDC. It puts the number closer to 1 in 44, but still the numbers are rising, prompting many medical professionals, teachers, and parents to try to discover the cause. And I'll simply point out, Steve Deace talked about this. He's on Twitter, and of course, Blaze TV host. He asked the question, what's the benign, innocent explanation for this rise in autism? What do you think, Duke?
Well, first of all, take a look at this chart here. I want to convey the magnitude of this problem. On the left hand, you have the dates there. So in 2000, the year 2000, 22 years ago, 1 in 150 kids was diagnosed as autistic. Jump ahead to 2018, that goes from 1 to 44. That is a staggering 3 times as many. It's a now you could make the argument that maybe in the last 20 years we've become better at spotting it, better at identifying it. Maybe we have better protocols to tell if kids are autistic or not. But that alone does not account for that huge rise. No. So that's the first thing I would say. It's a huge problem. But can I play devil's advocate with you, Dave?
Yes.
I know you'll let me do that because you've always got God on your side. I'll play the devil. So why don't we handle autism the same way we handle gender dysphoria, right? Instead of trying to fight it and cure it, because it's a spectrum, just like sexuality and gender is a spectrum, right? Because there's all sorts of ranges and spectral aspects of autism, from the mild to the extremely serious. So why don't we treat it like transgenderism? Rather than fighting it, trying to come up with medicine, or even trying to bother medically to find out where it comes from, let's just mainstream it, right? Let's make autism also part of the LGBTQ. Just a different way of relating. Let's have the same kind of approach to that. Because if that sounds like a ridiculous thing to do, I hope it does sound like a ridiculous thing to do, then think about what you're doing with gender dysphoria. Nevertheless, back to you, Dave.
Well, you made that point, I think it was yesterday in the story about puberty blockers.
Yes.
In grade schoolers, I think. No one ever thinks the way you just said, well, do we do this in any other, like autism? You would never do what you just said, but yet they're doing that. So there's this contradiction going on. But the answer seems to be consistent from experts across various fields that changes in diagnosis and understanding of autism. That seems to be why it's more widespread. So that's a confusing line in and of itself, Duke, because it's not like more people or more children, teenagers, have autism. It's that more adults or experts are understanding autism better, and there's changes in how you diagnose it.
Or, like transgenderism, it's a catch-all for everything else, right?
Interesting.
My wife, among her, has actually fibromyalgia. And that was one of those things that nobody ever knew about until everything else that she had, all these other things were ruled out. And so when the doctors couldn't decide what it was, they threw that tag at it. It became a garbage tag, right? Notice how nobody really talks about that anymore? Because fibromyalgia became one of those things when we can't label and we can't find any other reason for it, we'll make up this tag. I think that's probably happening with autism. There are all sorts of mental health issues that we're not paying sufficient attention to. I mentioned the transgender thing. Let's not treat it. Let's not get psychologists involved. Let's not give therapy to gender confused people. No, let's just mainstream it. I think that autism, to some degree, is a lazy person's way of not taking enough time with individual kids to see what they need.
Yes.
So I think a lot of these things are being clumped together. So once again, I think modern medicine is getting lazy when it comes to these. If we have one great big word like autism, which could be everything from ADHD to the desire to not be able to speak or talk or engage with anyone, across that spectrum again, I think we need to take a little bit of time, slow down, and be more thorough in how we gauge mental health in this country.
All right, well, education content is always the primary focus of the show. Before we go, let's leave you with some other stories worthy of a comment or two. And let's start in the Golden City, where San Francisco, a couple there was just fined $1,500 for not parking in the street in front of their home. You see, Judy and Ed Crane live on a steep hill where parking can be a challenge. So, for the last 36 years, they have opted to park on the car pad in front of their home, basically their driveway. But the City Planning Commission says due to an archaic law, it can't be allowed. Watch this.
We moved in and parked in that driveway every day and every night.
They live on the steep hill where parking can be a gravity-defying challenge. But they could slip into their driveway and park on their car pad, which they'd been doing every day for the past 36 years. But not anymore.
We got this email and we can't park in the parking pad anymore. And I said, that's crazy.
Out of the blue, the couple got this ticket for parking in their own driveway.
It was very surprising, to say the least.
And worse, it came with an enormous fine, $1,542 plus another $250 per day if they didn't get the car off their car pad.
I wrote back to them and I said I thought it was a mistake.
But it was no mistake and no ordinary parking ticket. It came from the city planning department telling them it's illegal to park in the front yard of a house.
And if we were found parking there again, it would be a $1,500 fine.
And so they quickly pulled the car out, but none of it made sense.
Why are you taking away something that has great utility, not just to us, but our neighbors in terms of more parking spaces?
Ed and Judy had been parking there for nearly 4 decades, and as far as they could tell, the space was used for parking since the house was built back in 1910. Officials tell us the couple was violating a code section banning vehicles in a setback in front of a house, though it's okay to park in front of a garage like this. Planning Chief Dan Sider says it was enacted decades ago for aesthetic reasons, to, quote, ensure that front yards don't turn into parking lots. But why enforce it now? He said someone made an anonymous complaint to the city. 2 neighbors also got tagged for the same violation. In an email, Sider wrote, I recognize that the property owner is frustrated, but the planning code doesn't allow for the city to grandfather illegal uses on account of their having flown below the radar for a length of time.
So first, I would not want to live in San Francisco. You couldn't pay me enough to live there. But second, Duke, so they're people's private property, they're telling people what to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you're somebody out there who's flirting with big government, you think that that's the answer, pay attention. Some archaic law from the World War I period that has not been enforced for 80 years because of some whistleblowing nosy busybody now, you're getting that kind of a fine? No, notice what big government can't do. It can't exercise common sense. Say, okay, here's a warning. How about that? How about a yellow ticket that says, we're warning you, don't do it again. Here's the code. No, $1,500. That, my friends, is the San Francisco treat, not rice-a-roni.
All right, we're going to stay in the Bay Area, but not for long, as a new study highlights the astronomical amount of money residents need to call this city home. According to a new Charles Schwab survey, you're going to need a minimum net worth of $1.7 million to feel, quote, financially comfortable living in San Francisco.
But you know what that means? 1.7 means? It means you can have your own house. It's probably about 600 square feet, right? And you can't park your car in the driveway.
It puts the tech hub in the top spot for American cities with the highest wealth threshold, but runners-up include New York City, which requires 1.4 million, Southern California with 1.3 million, and Washington, D.C. at 1.1 million. So to add just a little bit of insult to injury, the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, $3,000, just below New York's $3,600. So finally, speaking of money, a new map shows just how much you need to make to afford the average home in every state in America. So according to howmuch.net, based on a 30-year mortgage with a 10% down payment, your average household income must be $90,000 or more to own a home in California, Colorado, New York, and Massachusetts. You'll need a household income of at least $70,000 to live in Alaska, Arizona, Texas, Minnesota, North Carolina, Delaware, and New Jersey. And rounding out the bottom, you'll need a household income of at least $40,000 to live in Ohio and in West Virginia. Interesting that Ohio and West Virginia are on the bottom. So Duke, interesting way of seeing how much it costs to live in certain areas of the country.
Yeah, growing up in Ohio, it's almost embarrassing to be compared to West Virginia. And that, I mean, not to insult West Virginians, but wow.
He's speechless. Hey, that wraps up this segment. More to come next time.
All right, that does it for this show. For all of us at Freedom Project, we need you at now more than ever. Stay educated, my friends.